The nurse stopped counting and said, "These prescriptions do not match." The prescription slip trembled in my hands as I read it for the third time. Mrs. Patterson, 67, diabetic, Medicare insurance. Dr. Rebecca Chen had prescribed her exactly half the insulin she needed. I'd filled her prescriptions for 2 years and knew her dosage by heart. But the elderly man who'd left 5 minutes earlier, Mr. Jameson with his gold-plated private insurance, had walked out with enough OxyContin to sedate a horse for a minor back strain. "Sarah, you're holding up the line," called Janet from the next station over, but I couldn't move. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stared at the signature that was becoming far too familiar for all the wrong reasons. Dr. Rebecca Chen, MD. The woman who'd made my last 6 months at Westfield Pharmacy feel like a personal hell. I glanced at the clock, 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that already felt endless. Mrs. Patterson stood at the counter, her weathered hands gripping her purse strap, probably calculating whether she could afford to eat this week if she bought her medication. Behind her, 3 other patients waited with varying degrees of impatience, and I knew at least 2 of them had Chen prescriptions in a stack. "Is everything all right, dear?" Mrs. Patterson's voice carried that particular exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting the healthcare system longer than she should have to. I forced a smile and reached for the phone. "Just need to verify something with the doctor's office. It'll just be a minute." The minute stretched into 10 as I listened to Dr. Chen's receptionist put me on hold. When Chen finally picked up, her voice cut through the line like broken glass. "What is it now?" "I don't have time for pharmacy techs who can't read basic prescriptions. Dr. Chen, Mrs. Patterson's insulin prescription shows 10 units twice daily, but her previous prescriptions from Dr. Martinez were for 20 units twice. Are you questioning my medical judgment?" Her tone could have frozen fire. "Mrs. Patterson needs to lose weight and reduce her dependency on medication. Fill the prescription as written or I'll speak to your supervisor about your competency." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone still pressed to my ear, thinking about my grandmother Rosa. 3 years ago, she'd sat in a similar doctor's office, explaining her chronic pain to a physician who took one look at her Medicaid card and decided she was drug-seeking. She died 6 months later, having never received adequate pain management for the cancer that was eating her alive. Mrs. Patterson was still waiting, her eyes now filled with the kind of worry that comes from knowing something's wrong but not understanding what. I made my decision. "Mrs. Patterson, I need to make another call. This prescription doesn't look right for your usual dosage." I kept my voice steady, professional. "Would you mind taking a seat? I want to make sure you get exactly what you need." Her relief was visible. "You're a good girl, Sarah." "Thank you." As she settled into one of the waiting area chairs, I pulled out my phone and opened a new note. The timestamp read 3:03 p.m. I began typing, "Patient, Margaret Patterson, DOB March 12, 1956. Prescribed insufficient insulin dosage despite documented medical history indicating higher therapeutic need." It was the first entry in what would become a very long document. The next morning, I arrived at work 30 minutes early with a sick feeling in my stomach. Janet was already at her station, organizing the overnight prescription queue, and she looked up when I walked in. "You okay, hon? You look like you didn't sleep." She wasn't wrong. I'd spent most of the night researching prescription monitoring databases and documentation protocols, my laptop screen burning my eyes until 3 a.m. Just tired. Coffee hasn't kicked in yet. Dr. Chen's prescriptions were scattered throughout the morning batch like landmines. At 9:15 a.m., I processed one for Marcus Williams, a 34-year-old construction worker with a dislocated shoulder. Medicaid insurance. Chen had prescribed him ibuprofen, regular over-the-counter strength, and told him to tough it out. His file showed 3 previous visits for the same injury. 30 minutes later, Amanda Richardson picked up her prescription, 90 OxyContin tablets for chronic headaches. Blue Cross Blue Shield Premium Plan. Amanda was 23, perfectly healthy according to her file, and had been escalating pain medications for 2 months straight. When she left, I noticed her hands weren't shaking, her pupils weren't dilated, and she was checking her phone with the casual air of someone picking up candy, not prescription pain medication. I added both entries to my growing documentation, including photographs of the prescription slips and timestamps of when they were filled. My phone was becoming a digital evidence locker. At 11:42 a.m., my supervisor Rick emerged from the back office with a grim expression and a manila folder in his hands. "Sarah, I need to see you. Now." My heart hammered against my ribs as I followed him into the cramped office that smelled perpetually of stale coffee and sanitizer. Rick closed the door and sat heavily in his chair. "I got a call from Dr. Chen this morning. She's filed a complaint about your harassment and questioning her medical authority." He opened the folder and pulled out a formal write-up notice. "She says you've been calling her office multiple times, delaying patient care, and undermining physician-pharmacy relationships." I stared at the document. "Rick, her prescriptions don't make sense. Yesterday she underprescribed insulin to a diabetic patient and..." "Sarah." He held up his hand. "Dr. Chen brings this pharmacy significant business. Westfield Clinic accounts for nearly 30% of our monthly revenue." He pushed the write-up across the desk. "I need you to sign this acknowledgement and promise me you'll stop second-guessing her prescriptions. What about patient safety? What about our responsibility to..." "Our responsibility is to fill prescriptions as written by licensed physicians." Rick's voice had turned cold, administrative. "Not to play doctor." I picked up the pen, my hand trembling slightly. The write-up would go in my permanent file. One more complaint from Chen and I'd be terminated, losing my job, my health insurance, and any reference for future employment. I thought about my rent, my student loans, the career I'd worked 3 years to build. Then I thought about Mrs. Patterson, sitting in that chair yesterday, trusting me to help her. I thought about my grandmother Rosa, dismissed and discarded by a system that valued profit margins over human dignity. I signed the write-up, but as Rick filed it away, I was already planning my next move. At lunch break, I walked to the public library 2 blocks away and created a new email account, concern.healthcare.worker2024@gmail.com. Then I started researching the contact information for the DEA's Diversion Control Division and the State Medical Licensing Board. Dr. Chen had made this personal. She had no idea how personal I was about to make it for her. The next 2 weeks felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Every chin prescription that crossed my counter was a test: fill it without question and watch patients suffer, or document the discrepancies and risk my job. I chose documentation, building my evidence file one horrifying entry at a time. On a Thursday afternoon that would haunt me for months, Mrs. Eleanor Vasquez shuffled to my counter clutching a prescription for her rheumatoid arthritis. Her gnarled fingers, swollen from years of joint inflammation, could barely grip the paper. Dr. Chen had prescribed her children's Tylenol for pain that had been managed with prescription anti-inflammatories for 8 years. Mija, Mrs. Vasquez whispered, leaning across the counter. The doctor said my old medicine was too expensive for someone like me. Her accent thickened with emotion. She said I need to adjust my expectations. I stared at the prescription, my jaw clenching. Mrs. Vasquez had Medicaid and spoke English as a second language. 15 minutes earlier, I processed a prescription for Jennifer Walsh, a suburban mom with premium insurance who walked out with high-strength prescription anti-inflammatories for tennis elbow. Mrs. Vasquez, let me call the doctor about this dosage, I said, reaching for the phone. No, no. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Please don't call. The doctor already got angry at me for asking questions. She said if I complained again, she wouldn't see me anymore. Tears gathered in her weathered eyes. She's the only doctor accepting new Medicaid patients. My heart shattered. Dr. Chen wasn't just making medical decisions, she was holding patients hostage with their own desperation. That evening, I sat in my car in the pharmacy parking lot, updating my documentation file. The entries now filled 14 pages: systematic underprescribing to minority, elderly, and uninsured patients, massive overprescribing to wealthy patients with premium insurance. The pattern was undeniable, and it was getting worse. My phone buzzed with a text from my roommate, working late again. You okay? I wasn't okay. I hadn't been sleeping, barely eating, and jumping every time Rick called my name. The stress was eating me alive, but I couldn't stop. Every chin prescription felt like a personal attack on everything I believed healthcare should be. Friday morning brought my worst nightmare. At 10:23 a.m., a woman named Diana Foster approached my counter with her 8-year-old son, Michael. The boy was pale, listless, clinging to his mother's leg. Diana's hands shook as she handed me a prescription from Dr. Chen. He's been having these seizures, she whispered, glancing around nervously. Started 3 weeks ago. Dr. Chen said it's just anxiety and that I'm being an overprotective mother. The prescription was for a mild sedative. I looked at Michael's file history: no previous anxiety diagnoses, no family history of anxiety disorders. But there were 3 emergency room visits in the past month, 4 episodes that sounded exactly like seizures. Ma'am, has he seen a neurologist? I asked carefully. Diana's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Chen said specialists are unnecessary and expensive. She said our insurance wouldn't cover it anyway. She lowered her voice. But these episodes are getting worse. Yesterday he stopped breathing for almost a minute. I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't about insurance fraud or systematic discrimination anymore, this was about a child's life. Dr. Chen was denying this boy potentially life-saving neurological evaluation because his family had Medicaid. I made a decision that would change everything. Mrs. Foster, I need to make some phone calls before filling this. Would you mind waiting? I grabbed my cell phone and walked toward the consultation room. Actually, do you have your insurance card with you? I want to check something about specialist coverage. As Diana fumbled for her card, I was already dialing the number I'd memorized 2 weeks ago. The DEA Diversion Control Division answered on the second ring. This is Agent Martinez. How can I help you? I need to report a physician for prescription irregularities, I whispered, my heart hammering. And I think there's a child in immediate danger. Agent Martinez's voice sharpened immediately. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm and give me your location. Are you in immediate physical danger? No, but there's a child. I glanced through the consultation room window at Michael Foster, who was now sitting on the floor, his mother kneeling beside him with obvious panic. I'm a pharmacy technician at Westfield Pharmacy on Elm Street. I've been documenting prescription irregularities for weeks, but right now there's an 8-year-old boy whose seizures are being dismissed as anxiety. The prescribing physician is refusing neurological evaluation. What's the child's current condition? Conscious but lethargic. His mother says the episodes are worsening. Yesterday he stopped breathing briefly. My voice cracked. Agent Martinez, I think Dr. Chen is making medical decisions based on insurance status rather than patient needs. This boy could die while she's playing games with his treatment. I need you to document everything about this specific case: time, patient name if you can legally share it, exact prescription details. But first, has anyone contacted emergency services for this child? Through the window, I watched Michael's eyes roll back slightly. Diana was shaking his shoulder, calling his name. I think he's having an episode right now. I burst out of the consultation room. Diana, we need to call 911. Now. But Dr. Chen said. Dr. Chen isn't here. I was already dialing. 911, I need an ambulance at Westfield Pharmacy, 2847, Elm Street. 8-year-old male having seizure-like episode with breathing complications. Rick appeared from the back office, his face flushed with anger. Sarah, what the hell are you doing? You can't override physician orders. I'm not overriding anything. I'm calling emergency services for a child in distress. The dispatcher was asking for details while I kept my eyes on Michael, whose breathing had become shallow and irregular. Diana was crying, holding his hand. If Dr. Chen finds out you interfered with her patient care, then she can file another complaint. I knelt beside Michael, checking his pulse while the dispatcher guided me through basic first aid. His heartbeat was rapid and irregular. Diana, what time did his last episode start? About 10 minutes ago, but this one's different. He's never been this unresponsive. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes that felt like hours. As the EMTs loaded Michael onto a stretcher, I handed Diana my business card with my personal number written on the back. Make sure they know about the previous episodes and the ER visits. Demand a neurological consultation, and if anyone gives you trouble, call me immediately. Diana squeezed my hand. Thank you. Dr. Chen made me feel like I was crazy for worrying. After they left, Rick pulled me aside with barely contained fury. You just cost this pharmacy a major account. When Dr. Chen hears about this, she'll what? File another complaint. Fire me. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Rick, that child could have brain tumors, epilepsy, any number of serious conditions. Dr. Chen dismissed him because his family has Medicaid. That's not your determination to make. You're right. It should have been hers. I pulled out my phone and showed him the documentation file. But she's too busy overprescribing OxyContin to tennis players and golf widows to properly evaluate patients who actually need help. Rick's face went white as he scrolled through the entries. Sarah, where did you get this information? Every prescription that crossed my counter. Every phone call. Every pattern of discrimination I've witnessed. I took the phone back. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. Janet's been keeping her own informal notes. So has Carlos at the downtown location. The implication hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about one rogue technician anymore, this was about a pattern of negligence that multiple pharmacy staff had independently observed. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez, need to meet today. Bringing medical board investigator. Can you document access to prescription database? I looked at Rick, who was staring at Chen's prescriptions scattered across the counter with growing understanding. We need to talk, he said quietly. The meeting with Agent Martinez and Dr. Patricia Holbrook from the State Medical Board took place in the back room of a coffee shop 3 blocks from the pharmacy. At 7:30 p.m., the place was nearly empty except for 2 college students hunched over laptops and a barista wiping down tables with practice boredom. Agent Martinez looked exactly like I'd imagined, mid-40s, gray suit, the kind of steady presence that made you feel like problems could actually be solved. Dr. Holbrook was younger, maybe early 30s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a leather portfolio that looked like it had seen plenty of difficult conversations. Before we begin, Agent Martinez said, sliding a digital recorder across the table, I need to inform you that this is now part of an official federal investigation. Dr. Chen's prescribing patterns have been flagged by our monitoring systems for 6 months, but we needed someone with direct access to corroborate the data. My coffee grew cold as the implications sank in. You've been watching her. The prescription drug monitoring program flags physicians who prescribe outside normal parameters, Dr. Holbrook explained. Dr. Chen's numbers were unusual. High-volume opioid prescriptions to patients with no documented pain management history, combined with complaints from 3 different pharmacies about underprescribing essential medications. 3 pharmacies. My voice cracked. You mean this isn't just happening at Westfield? Agent Martinez nodded grimly. Mercy General Pharmacy filed reports about Dr. Chen underprescribing heart medications to elderly patients while overprescribing controlled substances to others. CVS on Market Street flagged her for writing post-surgical pain prescriptions that far exceeded standard protocols. He leaned forward. Sarah, you weren't the first person to notice this pattern. You were just the first willing to document it systematically. Dr. Holbrook opened her portfolio and pulled out a thick file. We've identified 47 patients who may have been inadequately treated, and 32 who received excessive controlled substances. She paused, meeting my eyes. How many entries are in your documentation? 86 as of this morning. I pulled out my phone, hands trembling slightly. I stopped counting individual prescriptions and started tracking patterns. Medicaid patients getting insufficient treatment, privately insured patients getting excessive controlled substances, and minorities being dismissed regardless of insurance status. We need copies of everything, Agent Martinez said. But I have to warn you, Dr. Chen will likely realize she's under investigation soon. These cases move quickly once we begin interviewing patients and reviewing medical records. My stomach dropped. What does that mean for me? She'll probably try to discredit you, Dr. Holbrook said matter-of-factly. Question your competency, claim you've been harassing her office, maybe even suggest you've been accessing patient information inappropriately. She smiled tightly. We've seen it before. Physicians under investigation often attack the credibility of whoever reported them. But everything I documented came through normal pharmacy operations. I never accessed anything I wasn't supposed to. We know. Your supervisor Rick confirmed that when we spoke to him this afternoon. The world tilted sideways. You talked to Rick? Agent Martinez nodded. He contacted us after your incident with the foster child. Turns out he's been fielding complaints about Dr. Chen for months, not just from staff, but from patients' family members. He consulted his notes. A daughter whose father's blood pressure medication was reduced to save money. A husband whose wife's diabetes medication was switched to a less effective generic to teach her about healthcare costs. Rick never told me about other complaints. Because Dr. Chen threatened to pull Westfield Clinic's business, which represents 30% of your pharmacy's revenue, Dr. Holbrook said. But when Rick saw your documentation alongside the other complaints, he realized the liability exposure was far worse than losing one account. My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, this is Diana Foster. Michael is stable. Neurologist found a brain tumor. Surgery scheduled tomorrow. Thank you for saving my son's life. I showed the message to both investigators, my hands shaking. Dr. Holbrook's expression hardened. 8-year-old with a brain tumor misdiagnosed as anxiety, she said, making notes. How long had Dr. Chen been treating him? 3 weeks of episodes. 3 ER visits. His mother said Dr. Chen refused specialist referrals because of insurance costs. Agent Martinez closed his notebook. We're going to need you to testify, Sarah. Federal court, medical board hearings, possibly civil depositions if families decide to sue. He met my eyes. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? I thought about Michael Foster, unconscious on that pharmacy floor. About Mrs. Vasquez, told to adjust her expectations for pain relief. About my grandmother Rosa, dying in agony because a doctor decided she was drug-seeking. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The next morning, I walked into Westfield Pharmacy to find Dr. Chen waiting at the consultation counter like a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. She wore her usual pristine white coat and that smile that never reached her eyes, but something was different. There was a manic energy radiating from her that made my skin crawl. "Sarah Martinez," she said loudly enough for the entire pharmacy to hear. Just the person I wanted to see. It was 7:43 a.m. We didn't open until 8, which meant she'd been waiting outside. Rick emerged from the back office, his face pale and drawn, followed by a woman I didn't recognize in an expensive navy suit. "Dr. Chen, perhaps we should discuss this privately," Rick said, his voice strained. "Oh no, I think Sarah's colleagues deserve to hear this." Dr. Chen's voice carried that particular tone of someone who thought they held all the cards. "Especially since she's been spreading malicious rumors about my practice." The woman in the navy suit stepped forward, extending a business card. "Ms. Martinez, I'm Jennifer Walsh from Westfield Clinic's legal department. We need to discuss your recent harassment of Dr. Chen and unauthorized access to patient information." My blood ran cold. Jennifer Walsh, I recognized that name from my documentation. She was the tennis elbow patient who received high-strength prescription anti-inflammatories while Mrs. Vasquez got children's Tylenol. Dr. Chen had brought her own overprescribed patient as her lawyer. "I haven't harassed anyone," I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I've been doing my job, which includes verifying prescription accuracy." Dr. Chen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Verifying? Is that what you call photographing confidential prescriptions and building some sort of conspiracy file?" She turned to address Janet and the other morning staff who had gathered nervously nearby. "Did you know Sarah has been secretly documenting patient information and sharing it with federal investigators?" Janet's eyes widened. Carlos, who'd just arrived for his shift, dropped his coffee cup. The crash echoed through the sudden silence. "How do you know about the investigation?" The question escaped before I could stop it. Dr. Chen's smile widened triumphantly. "Because Agent Martinez called my office yesterday requesting patient files. Apparently, someone filed a federal complaint claiming I'm systematically discriminating against patients based on insurance status." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. "The same someone who's been taking pictures of prescriptions and stalking my patients." Jennifer Walsh opened her leather briefcase and pulled out a thick document. "Ms. Martinez, this is a cease and desist order regarding your harassment of Dr. Chen and her patients. We're also filing a formal complaint with the State Pharmacy Board regarding your unauthorized documentation of protected health information." My hands trembled as I looked at the legal papers. They were accusing me of HIPAA violations, professional misconduct, and creating a hostile work environment. The complaint requested my immediate suspension and permanent revocation of my pharmacy technician license. "Sarah," Rick said quietly, "I think you should call someone." Before I could respond, my phone rang. Agent Martinez's number flashed on the screen, and Dr. Chen's eyes locked onto it like a hawk spotting prey. "Answer it," she said sweetly. "Let's all hear what your federal friend has to say." I stepped toward the back office, but Jennifer Walsh blocked my path. "I think this conversation should be public, don't you? Since you've made Dr. Chen's practice so public." My finger hovered over the accept button, knowing that whatever Agent Martinez had to tell me would change everything. Behind me, I could hear Janet whispering frantically to Carlos, and Rick was making his own phone call in hushed, urgent tones. Dar. Chen was still smiling, but I noticed something else now, a slight tremor in her hands, a tightness around her eyes that suggested she wasn't as confident as she appeared. "Having second thoughts, Sarah?" she asked. "It's not too late to apologize for this witch hunt and return to simply doing your job without playing detective." The phone continued ringing. Through the front window, I saw a black sedan pull into the parking lot, followed by another. Agent Martinez's ringtone finally stopped, then immediately started again. This time, I answered. "Sarah, don't say anything over the phone." Agent Martinez's voice was sharp, urgent. "Dr. Chen's attorney contacted the DEA this morning claiming you've been extorting her patients for information. We need you to come in immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. Through my peripheral vision, I could see Dr. Chen's satisfied smirk widening as she watched my face crumble. Jennifer Walsh was already pulling out her phone, probably recording my reaction. I started, then caught myself. Agent Martinez had said not to talk. "Sarah, listen carefully. Say nothing to anyone until you have legal representation. The hospital administration is claiming you accessed patient files beyond your authorization level." His voice dropped lower. "Someone's been feeding them information about our investigation." My legs felt weak. I gripped the counter to steady myself as the implications crashed over me. How is that possible? Everything I documented came through normal prescription processing. We'll figure it out, but right now Dr. Chen's people are spinning this as a rogue pharmacy tech with delusions of grandeur who violated patient privacy to build a harassment case. Agent Martinez paused. "The Michael Foster situation is the only thing keeping you from being arrested right now." Dr. Chen stepped closer, clearly trying to overhear. "Problems, Sarah? Maybe your federal friends aren't as supportive as you thought." I turned away from her, lowering my voice. "What about the other pharmacies? The pattern you mentioned? That's complicated. Mercy General's complaint was withdrawn yesterday. CVS is claiming their flagging system malfunctioned." Agent Martinez's frustration bled through the phone. Someone with significant influence is making this investigation very difficult. My stomach dropped. Through the front window, I watched two more cars pull into the parking lot, a hospital administration vehicle and what looked like a news van. Dr. Chen followed my gaze and her smile turned predatory. "Expecting company?" she asked innocently. Jennifer Walsh snapped her briefcase shut. "Ms. Martinez, in light of the federal investigations, complications, Westfield Clinic is prepared to offer you a settlement. Drop all complaints against Dr. Chen, surrender your documentation, and sign a non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we won't pursue criminal charges for privacy violations." Criminal charges? My voice cracked. I haven't committed any crimes. Photographing patient prescriptions without authorization, sharing protected health information with federal agents, accessing medical records beyond your scope of practice. Jennifer Walsh counted off on her manicured fingers. Each violation carries potential felony charges and up to 5 years in prison. Rick appeared at my elbow, his face gray with stress. Sarah, maybe you should consider their offer. This is getting way out of hand. I stared at him. Rick, you spoke to the investigators yesterday. You confirmed everything I documented was legitimate. His eyes wouldn't meet mine. I confirmed you had access to the prescriptions through normal operations. But Sarah, photographing them and building files, that might have crossed some lines I wasn't aware of. The betrayal hit harder than Dr. Chen's threats. Rick had encouraged the investigation when it might protect the pharmacy from liability, but now he was abandoning me to save his own skin. 10 minutes, Jennifer Walsh announced, checking her expensive watch. The offer expires when those reporters start asking questions. Through the window, I could see a woman with a microphone talking to a cameraman while gesturing toward the pharmacy. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Holbrook. Do not sign anything. Medical board has new evidence. Stall them. Dr. Chen noticed me checking my phone and her confident expression flickered for just a moment. Time's running out, Sarah, she said softly. Choose wisely. Your entire future depends on the next few minutes. But as I watched her face, I realized something that changed everything. Dr. Chen wasn't just trying to silence me, she was terrified. And terrified people made mistakes. I looked straight into her eyes and smiled for the first time in weeks. Actually, Dr. Chen, I think my future just got a lot brighter. The confidence drained from Dr. Chen's face as my phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Holbrook's number, and I answered it on speaker before anyone could stop me. Sarah, get everyone away from you right now. We just arrested Dr. Chen's business partner, Dr. Marcus Webb, at his clinic downtown. He's been running a pill mill operation with Chen for 18 months, selling prescriptions to dealers while denying legitimate patients proper care to avoid scrutiny. The pharmacy went dead silent. Jennifer Walsh's face had gone white as paper, and Dr. Chen was backing toward the door like a cornered animal. That's impossible, Dr. Chen stammered. I barely know Dr. Webb. We've maybe consulted on 2 cases. $47,000 in cash deposits to your personal account over 6 months, Dr. Holbrook continued, her voice carrying clearly through the speaker. All traced back to Webb's operation. Plus text messages about managing the product flow and keeping the Medicare patients happy with scraps. I watched Dr. Chen's lawyer frantically gesture for her to stop talking, but the panic had taken over. Those deposits were legitimate consultation fees. And the messages were taken out of context. Dr. Chen's voice was rising to a near shriek. Sarah Martinez violated federal privacy laws to build a harassment case because she's obsessed with some dead grandmother. The moment the words left her mouth, I knew she'd made a fatal mistake. I'd never mentioned my grandmother to anyone at the pharmacy or in any of my documentation. The only way Dr. Chen could know about Rosa was if she'd been digging into my personal background, which meant she'd been investigating me long before I'd started documenting her prescriptions. Rick stepped away from Dr. Chen like she was radioactive. How do you know about Sarah's grandmother? Jennifer Walsh grabbed Dr. Chen's arm, hissing, stop talking. Right now. But Dr. Chen was spiraling, 18 months of illegal activity and paranoia finally catching up with her. I know all about her precious Rosa Martinez, how she died begging for pain medication like every other drug-seeking addict who couldn't accept that doctors know better than. Dr. Chen. Agent Martinez's voice cut through her rant like a blade. He'd entered through the back door with 2 other agents, all wearing bulletproof vests marked DEA. You're under arrest for conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, insurance fraud, and violation of the Controlled Substances Act. The pharmacy erupted into chaos. Jennifer Walsh was shouting about unlawful search and seizure while fumbling for her phone. Dr. Chen lunged toward the prescription counter like she was trying to grab something, but Agent Martinez caught her arm. Rebecca Chen, you have the right to remain silent, he began, but she wasn't listening. This is a setup. Sarah Martinez has been stalking my patients and falsifying records. Dr. Chen's voice cracked with hysteria. She's the one who should be arrested. She violated HIPAA laws and... Dr. Chen, we've been monitoring your prescription database access for 3 months, Agent Martinez said calmly as he cuffed her hands behind her back. Every query, every patient file, every prescription modification. Sarah Martinez never accessed anything beyond her normal work duties. You, however, have been altering patient records after the fact to cover your tracks. My knees went weak with relief. They'd been watching the whole time, collecting digital evidence of Dr. Chen's crimes while I unknowingly provided the human perspective they needed to build their case. The pill mill operation generated over $2 million, Agent Martinez continued as he led Dr. Chen toward the door. Selling OxyContin prescriptions for $500 each while systematically denying proper care to legitimate patients who might ask too many questions. Janet grabbed my arm as Dr. Chen was walked past us. Even in handcuffs, she turned to glare at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, she snarled. When the medical board realizes you've been playing detective instead of doing your job. Actually, Dr. Holbrook's voice came through my phone speaker. The medical board is recommending Sarah Martinez for a commendation. Her documentation helped us identify 47 cases of medical neglect and saved at least 3 lives. As the DEA agents loaded Dr. Chen into their sedan, the reporters outside pressed against the windows, cameras flashing. I watched through the glass as the woman who'd made my life hell for months was finally facing consequences for her actions. But even as relief flooded through me, I knew Dr. Chen was right about one thing: this wasn't over. Not until every patient she'd neglected got justice. 2 weeks after Dr. Chen's arrest, I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by certified mail to my apartment. Thick legal letterhead, expensive paper, the kind that screamed money and power. I opened it standing in my kitchen, coffee growing cold on the counter. Martinez vs. Westfield Healthcare Network, notice of wrongful termination lawsuit. My hand started shaking as I read further. Dr. Chen's legal team wasn't giving up. They were claiming I'd orchestrated an elaborate frame job, that her arrest was the result of falsified evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. They'd filed a 50-page motion alleging I'd manipulated prescription records, coached patients to lie about their treatment, and conspired with federal agents to fabricate the pill mill charges. The worst part. 3 patients had signed affidavits supporting her version of events. I recognized the names immediately: Jennifer Walsh, the tennis elbow patient who'd received excessive pain medications; Thomas Brennan, a real estate developer who'd been getting monthly OxyContin prescriptions for chronic back pain despite having no documented injury; and Patricia Morse, a suburban housewife who'd been prescribed enough Adderall to supply a college dormitory. All 3 claimed I'd harassed them during prescription pickups, making inappropriate comments about their medications and suggesting their doctor was pushing pills. According to their sworn statements, I created a hostile environment that made them feel unsafe seeking legitimate medical care. "This is insane," I muttered, reading Patricia Morse's affidavit. She claimed I'd told her that her Adderall prescription was suspicious and implied she was abusing stimulants. I'd never spoken to Patricia Morse beyond basic prescription confirmation. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez: "Need to meet." New developments. Coffee shop on 5th Street, 2 p.m. The urgency in his message sent ice through my veins. If the DEA was calling emergency meetings, something had gone very wrong with their case. At Brew and Bean, Agent Martinez looked older than I remembered, stress lines etched deeper around his eyes. Dr. Holbrook sat across from him, a manila folder thick with documents spread between them. "Sarah, we have a problem," Martinez said without preamble. "Dr. Webb is claiming he never worked with Dr. Chen directly. Says their communication was through a third party, someone with access to pharmacy databases who fed them information about which patients to target." My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. What kind of information? Insurance verification, medication histories, patient demographics. Dr. Holbrook's voice was grim. Someone was identifying vulnerable patients, elderly, minority, poor, and steering them toward Chen for substandard care while directing profitable patients toward Webb for overmedication. But that would require access to multiple pharmacy systems, I said, my mind racing. Not just Westfield, but Mercy General, CVS. Exactly. Martinez leaned forward. Webb is claiming this third-party approached him 18 months ago with a list of high-value targets and detailed prescription histories. He's offering to testify against both Dr. Chen and this mystery accomplice in exchange for a reduced sentence. The implications crashed over me like cold water. He's saying I was the inside source. He's saying someone was. And Dr. Chen's defense team is arguing that person was you, that you manipulated the system to frame her while providing patient information to Webb's pill mill. Dr. Holbrook opened the manila folder and pulled out printouts of database queries. These are pharmacy system access logs from the past 6 months. Someone with technician-level credentials has been running searches on patients from multiple locations. I stared at the pages, my heart hammering. The searches were comprehensive: insurance status, prescription history, doctor shopping flags, demographic information. Exactly the kind of data someone would need to identify which patients could be exploited and which might cause problems. "Sarah, I need you to look at these timestamps," Martinez said quietly. "Tell me where you were on these dates and times." October 15th, 2:47 a.m., patient database query, 47 records accessed. October 22nd, 11:33 p.m., insurance verification system, 23 searches. November 3rd, 1:15 a.m., prescription monitoring database, 156 patient records reviewed. I was home sleeping, I whispered. I don't work nights, and I've never accessed the monitoring database from home. I don't even have those credentials. But even as I said it, I realized how it would sound in court. A pharmacy technician claiming innocence while digital evidence showed systematic database manipulation using credentials linked to her employment ID. Dr. Holbrook's expression was sympathetic but professional. "Sarah, someone has been very careful to make this look like you were web source. The question is, who had access to your login credentials and detailed knowledge of your work schedule?" My phone started ringing. Rick's number flashed on the screen, and suddenly I understood exactly who had both access and motive. Martinez noticed my expression. "Sarah. What is it?" I said slowly, "I know who's been setting me up." I stared at Rick's number flashing on my phone screen, pieces clicking into place like a horrifying puzzle. Agent Martinez and Dr. Holbrook watched me intently as the ringing continued. "Sarah?" Martinez prompted. "Rick has supervisor access to all our systems," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Master credentials that work across the entire Westfield network, our pharmacy, Mercy General, even the CVS locations when they need prescription transfers." The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. This time it was a text: "Sarah, where are you? Reporters are here asking about falsified evidence. We need to talk now." Dr. Holbrook leaned forward. What else would he have access to? Employee schedules, login credentials, the ability to reset passwords and access databases remotely. My hands were shaking as more pieces fell into place. He always knew when I worked late, when I was documenting Chen's prescriptions. And he's the one who told me to stop questioning her orders. Martinez was already on his phone, speaking in urgent, clipped tones to someone at the DEA office. I caught fragments: "Need immediate warrant for Richard Kowalski, pharmacy supervisor, database access logs." "There's something else," I continued, the full scope of the betrayal hitting me. "Rick called you after the Michael Foster incident. He made it sound like he was being helpful, corroborating my documentation. But actually he was feeding us information that would support Webb's story," Dr. Holbrook finished grimly. "Making sure we had just enough evidence to arrest Dr. Chen while positioning you as the inside source." My phone buzzed with another text from Rick: "Sarah, Channel 7 is running a story tonight about falsified pharmacy records. Legal says if you don't come in to sign a statement, they can't protect you from the investigation." The manipulation was breathtaking in its scope. Rick had encouraged my documentation, knowing it would provide evidence for the federal case while simultaneously building a paper trail that made me look like Webb's accomplice. Every time I'd updated my notes, every photo I'd taken, every late night I'd spent researching, he'd known about all of it. But why? I asked. Why help Webb and Chen in the first place? Agent Martinez finished his call and turned back to us. According to preliminary financial records, Richard Kowalski received $87,000 in consulting fees from a shell company linked to Webb's operation over the past year. His expression was grim. He wasn't just providing patient information, he was actively steering vulnerable patients toward Chen while directing profitable cases to Webb. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too hot. I thought about Mrs. Patterson's insulin shortage, Mrs. Vasquez's inadequate pain relief, Michael Foster's misdiagnosed seizures. Rick hadn't just enabled their suffering, he'd orchestrated it for profit. The overnight database searches, I realized. He was using my credentials to make it look like I was the one gathering intelligence for Webb. Exactly. And when our investigation started getting close, he positioned himself as the helpful supervisor who discovered his rogue technician scheme. Martinez stood up, checking his watch. We need to move fast. If Rick realizes we're onto him, he'll destroy evidence and disappear. Dr. Holbrook was gathering her files. Sarah, we need you to go back to the pharmacy and act normal. Don't let Rick know we suspect him. Are you insane? My voice cracked. He's been setting me up for months. What if he? We'll have agents watching every entrance. But we need him to access those database systems one more time while we're monitoring the connections. It's the only way to prove he's been using your credentials. I thought about the 3 patients who'd signed affidavits against me, the pending lawsuits, the criminal charges still hanging over my head. Rick held the keys to clearing my name, but walking back into that pharmacy felt like stepping into a trap. My phone rang again. This time it wasn't Rick, it was Diana Foster. Sarah, I just saw the news about falsified evidence. Please tell me they're not saying you made up Michael's case. I closed my eyes, thinking about her 8-year-old son recovering from brain surgery that almost came too late. Mrs. Foster, I promise you, everything I documented was real. Then prove it, she said simply. Agent Martinez was watching my face, waiting for my decision. Through the coffee shop window, I could see Westfield Pharmacy 3 blocks away, where Rick was probably destroying evidence and preparing his next move. I stood up, my legs steadier than I'd expected. Let's go catch him. The walk back to Westfield Pharmacy felt like a death march. Agent Martinez's voice crackled through the tiny earpiece they'd given me. Remember, act completely normal. We need him to access the database systems while we're recording the connections. My hands trembled as I pushed through the front door at 3:47 p.m., the familiar chime announcing my return. Rick was behind the consultation counter, frantically typing on his laptop while papers scattered around him like evidence of panic. Sarah. Thank God you're here. His relief seemed genuine, which made his betrayal even more sickening. Channel 7 called asking about database irregularities. I told them it was probably a system glitch, but legal wants documentation of all your recent access logs. I forced my voice to stay steady. What kind of documentation? Just routine stuff. Login times, which patients you've looked up, prescription queries. Rick's fingers were flying across the keyboard as he spoke. I'm pulling your records now to show everything was legitimate. Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Martinez whisper, he's accessing the monitoring system. Keep him talking. Rick, about those late nights when I was documenting Chen's prescriptions, I said, moving closer to watch his screen. You never mentioned that other pharmacies were having similar issues. His typing paused for just a moment, so brief I might have imagined it. I didn't want to worry you. Besides, each pharmacy handles their own compliance issues. On his screen, I could see patient records scrolling past, Margaret Patterson, Eleanor Vasquez, Michael Foster. But there were others I didn't recognize, dozens of names with detailed insurance information and prescription histories from multiple locations. That's a lot of patients, I observed, my heart racing. Are those all from our system? Cross-referencing between databases to show the feds that Chen's pattern extended beyond Westfield. Rick's explanation sounded rehearsed. The more documentation we provide, the better it looks for the pharmacy's cooperation. Agent Martinez's voice in my ear, got him. Those are Webb's patient targets from 6 different pharmacy locations. He's accessing systems he shouldn't have credentials for. I watched Rick's screen more carefully, noticing timestamps on the database queries that made my blood run cold. November 8, 2:15 a.m., the same date and time from the evidence logs Dr. Holbrook had shown me. Rick wasn't just accessing the systems now, he was reviewing his previous searches using my stolen credentials. Rick, I said quietly, why are some of these searches showing my employee ID if you're running them now? His fingers froze over the keyboard. For a moment, the only sound was the pharmacy's air conditioning humming overhead and the distant traffic outside. System probably cached your login from when you were researching Chen's patients, he said finally, but his voice had changed. The helpful supervisor mask was slipping. At 2 a.m. When I was home sleeping. Rick slowly turned to face me, and I saw something in his eyes that made me step backward. The pretense of concern had vanished, replaced by the calculating look of someone whose carefully constructed plan was falling apart. You know, Sarah, you always were too smart for your own good. His voice was different now, colder, more controlled. Just like your grandmother Rosa, asking too many questions about medications she didn't understand. The mention of my grandmother hit like a physical blow. How do you know about? About Rosa Martinez, age 73, died at Mercy General after being flagged as a drug-seeking patient? Rick's smile was ugly. I know because I helped build the database flags that marked her as high risk. Chronic pain complaints, multiple doctor visits, Medicaid insurance, all the red flags that made her perfect for denial protocols. My earpiece crackled. Sarah, get out. Now. Backup is 60 seconds away. But I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Rick had been involved in my grandmother's death from the beginning. You killed her, I whispered. Rick laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I helped optimize healthcare resources, Sarah. Some patients are just more valuable than others. The words hung in the air between us like poison. Rick's confession about my grandmother should have shattered me, but instead it crystallized everything into sharp, cold focus. Through my earpiece, I could hear Agent Martinez shouting instructions to his team, but Rick was already moving. You think you're so righteous, don't you? He slicked around the counter toward me, his supervisor keycard still dangling from his belt. Building your little evidence files, playing detective. But you never asked the right questions. I backed toward the front door, keeping my voice steady. What questions, Rick? Like why Dr. Chen was so easy to catch. Why her prescribing patterns were so obvious. His smile was predatory now. She was supposed to be the fall guy, Sarah. The arrogant doctor who got too greedy and too careless. My blood turned to ice water. You set her up too. Webb needed someone to take the heat when the DEA started sniffing around. Chen was perfect, abrasive, dismissive, the kind of doctor everyone loves to hate. Rick was still advancing, forcing me deeper into the pharmacy. We fed her the profitable patients, let her think she was building her own side business. When the investigation got too close, she'd take the blame while Webb disappeared with the real money. But I started documenting everything too early, I realized. Before you were ready to sacrifice her. Exactly. Your little crusade accelerated our timeline by 6 months. Rick's voice turned bitter. We had to improvise, frame you as Webb's inside source while making Chen look like the mastermind. Through the front window, I could see Agent Martinez and his team positioning themselves outside. But Rick followed my gaze and his expression darkened. Federal agents. You're wearing a wire, aren't you, Sarah? He reached for his laptop, fingers flying over the keyboard. Deleting records, clearing browser history, severing database connections. By the time they get a warrant for this computer, everything will be gone. I realized with growing horror that Rick wasn't panicking, he was executing an escape plan. How long have you been planning this? 2 years of preparation. Offshore accounts, false identities, elimination protocols. His typing never slowed. Did you think a pharmacy supervisor could afford a house in Millbrook Heights on $40,000 a year? Webb's operation cleared $3 million, and I was his operational architect. The front door chimed as Agent Martinez burst in with 3 other agents, weapons drawn. But Rick was already smashing his laptop hard drive with a prescription bottle paperweight, destroying evidence with practiced efficiency. Richard Kowalski, federal agents. Step away from the computer. Rick laughed, still hammering the destroyed laptop. Gentlemen, meet Sarah Martinez, your star witness. Too bad she's about to be discredited by her own psychological evaluation. Agent Martinez kept his weapon trained on Rick while gesturing for me to move toward the door. What psychological evaluation? The one Dar. Chen's legal team ordered after Sarah's breakdown at the Foster incident. Rick pulled a manila folder from under the counter. Acute stress disorder, paranoid delusions, obsessive documentation of imaginary patterns. Very sad, really. I snatched the folder from his hands before Agent Martinez could stop me. Inside were psychological evaluation forms, hospital intake records, and medication prescriptions, all bearing my name and signature, all dated 3 days ago. I never had a psychological evaluation, I said, my voice barely steady. No, but according to these records, you did. Right after your nervous breakdown when you started hallucinating prescription irregularities. Rick's smile was triumphant even with federal agents surrounding him. Post-traumatic stress from your grandmother's death, manifesting as paranoid conspiracy theories about doctor-patient relationships. Agent Martinez grabbed the folder, scanning the documents with growing alarm. These look official. Hospital letterhead, licensed psychiatrist signatures, medication orders for antipsychotic drugs. Because they are official, Rick said proudly. Dr. Webb had connections throughout the medical community. Fabricating mental health records for inconvenient witnesses was just another service we provided. My knees went weak as the full scope of their operation became clear. They hadn't just been selling prescriptions, they'd been systematically destroying anyone who threatened their network. How many people? I whispered. Rick's handcuffs clicked into place, but his expression remained smug. How many whistleblowers, Sarah? Or how many patients who asked too many questions? Agent Martinez was reading through my fabricated psychiatric records, his face growing darker with each page. Sarah, we need to get you to a federal facility immediately. If these records surface during Chen's trial, they'll destroy my credibility and discredit everything I documented, I finished. The elegant simplicity of their trap was breathtaking. Even in custody, Rick was still playing chess while everyone else played checkers. As the DEA agents led Rick away, he turned back with one final smile. Give my regards to Dr. Webb when you visit him in minimum security prison, Sarah. I'm sure he'll enjoy hearing about your mental health struggles. The federal courthouse felt like a mausoleum as I walked through the metal detectors at 8:30 a.m., my heels echoing against marble floors that had witnessed decades of justice being served. Agent Martinez waited by the elevator banks, his expression grim as he reviewed a thick manila folder that seemed to grow thicker every day. How bad is it? I asked, though his face already told me the answer. Rick's psychiatric evaluation gambit is working better than we hoped it wouldn't, he said as we stepped into the elevator. Dr. Chen's defense team is calling 3 expert witnesses to testify about your alleged mental state, and Judge Harrison is considering allowing the fabricated records as evidence. My stomach dropped to the basement level. But you proved those records were fake. Webb's people created them to discredit witnesses. We proved they were fabricated, yes. But Rick's lawyer is arguing that the falsification was done to protect your privacy, that you actually did have a psychological evaluation, but Webb's people altered the dates to make it look recent rather than historical. Agent Martinez's jaw tightened. It's complete nonsense, but it's creating reasonable doubt about your credibility. The elevator dinged softly as we reached the 15th floor. Through the doors, I could see the familiar chaos of a high-profile federal case, reporters with cameras, lawyers wheeling boxes of documents, and Dr. Chen herself sitting at the defense table in an expensive navy suit that made her look like a respectable physician rather than a criminal. There's something else, Martinez said as we walked toward the prosecution's conference room. We found Rick's real escape plan. He handed me a printout of bank records showing wire transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Luxembourg. The amounts were staggering, $847,000 transferred over 6 months, all from shell companies linked to Webb's pill mill operation. Rick wasn't planning to disappear, I realized, scanning the dates. He was planning to retire. Exactly. And according to his laptop's browsing history, the parts our tech team could recover, he was researching extradition treaties and non-disclosure settlements. Martinez opened the conference room door. Sarah, I need you to understand what we're walking into today. Inside, Assistant U.S. Attorney Diana Reeves was surrounded by boxes of evidence, her usually perfect appearance showing signs of stress. She looked up when we entered, her expression a mixture of determination and worry. "Sarah, thank God you're here early. We have 47 minutes before opening statements, and Dr. Chen's team just filed a motion to exclude your testimony entirely." My heart hammered against my ribs. On what grounds? Mental incompetency and unreliable witness testimony. Diana handed me a legal brief that was somehow even thicker than Martinez's folder. They're claiming your documentation was the product of psychological delusions, that you imagined patterns that didn't exist while Rick was actually trying to protect patients from your erratic behavior. I stared at the brief, my hands trembling. The defense had twisted everything. My late nights documenting prescriptions became evidence of obsessive behavior, my calls to Dr. Chen's office were harassment, and my federal complaints were the desperate acts of someone losing touch with reality. But what about Michael Foster? What about the brain tumor that Dr. Chen missed? They're claiming you coached the family to lie, that Michael's seizures were actually caused by anxiety medications you suggested his mother give him. Diana's voice was steady, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "Sarah, they've built a comprehensive alternative narrative where you're the villain and Dr. Chen is the victim." The conference room felt like it was closing in around me. Through the window, I could see Dr. Chen conferring with her legal team, occasionally glancing in our direction with what looked like satisfaction. "Can we prove Rick was the real inside source?" I asked. Martinez nodded grimly. "We can prove Rick accessed the databases using your credentials, we can prove he received money from Webb's operation, and we can prove he fabricated your psychiatric records. But Dr. Chen's team is arguing that Rick was actually trying to stop you, that the money was payment for investigating your suspicious behavior. And the jury might believe it," Diana added quietly. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Chen's lead attorney, Harrison Wade, approached the witness stand where I'd been sitting for 23 agonizing minutes. His silver hair and tailored suit projected a kind of authority that made juries trust him instinctively, and I could see several jurors already nodding along with his questions. "Ms. Martinez," Wade said, his voice carrying just the right note of sympathetic concern, "you've testified that you worked late nights documenting what you believed were prescription irregularities. Can you tell the jury how many hours of sleep you were getting during this period?" My palms were sweating against the wooden rail. "Maybe 4 or 5 hours a night. I was concerned about patient safety." 4 or 5 hours. Wade repeated this for emphasis, turning to face the jury. "And during these sleep-deprived late nights, you were photographing confidential patient prescriptions and building what you've called documentation files. I was creating a record of concerning patterns. Ms. Martinez, isn't it true that your supervisor, Mr. Kowalski, repeatedly asked you to stop this behavior because it was affecting your job performance?" The question was a trap, but every answer felt like walking deeper into quicksand. "Rick told me to stop questioning Dr. Chen's prescriptions, yes. And when a concerned supervisor asks an employee to stop obsessive documentation of imaginary problems, most rational people would listen, wouldn't they?" Wade's tone remained gentle, but the implication was clear. Diana Reeves shot to her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation about the defendant's mental state." "Sustained," Judge Harrison ruled, but the damage was done. I could see two jurors exchanging glances that suggested they were buying Wade's narrative. Wade consulted his notes with theatrical precision. "Ms. Martinez, you've mentioned your grandmother Rosa several times in your testimony. Can you tell the jury about the circumstances of her death?" My throat went dry. We prepared for this question, but hearing it in open court felt like a physical assault. "She died of cancer 3 years ago. She didn't receive adequate pain management because her doctor assumed she was drug-seeking. And this traumatic loss occurred how long before you began your campaign against Dr. Chen?" "It wasn't a campaign." "Please answer the question, Ms. Martinez. How long after your grandmother's death did you begin systematically targeting Dr. Chen?" The math was damning, and Wade knew it. "About 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years, you carried grief and anger about your grandmother's medical care, and then you encountered Dr. Chen, another physician prescribing pain medications." Wade paused, letting the timeline sink in with the jury. "Isn't it possible that your documented patterns were actually your mind trying to recreate and resolve your grandmother's situation?" "Objection." Diana was on her feet again. "The witness is not qualified to diagnose psychological conditions." Sustained. But Wade was already moving to his next attack. "Ms. Martinez, you testified that you never accessed patient databases inappropriately. Are you familiar with the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act?" My blood turned to ice. "Yes. Are you aware that accessing protected medical information beyond your authorized scope, even within your own workplace, constitutes a federal felony under that act?" Diana stood up again, but Wade raised his hand. "Your Honor, I'm not asking her to incriminate herself. I'm simply establishing that Ms. Martinez was aware her documentation activities might be illegal." Judge Harrison nodded reluctantly. "Answer the question, Ms. Martinez." Yes, I was aware that unauthorized access could be illegal. But everything I documented came through normal prescription processing." Wade smiled like a shark scenting blood. "Normal prescription processing at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday when you weren't scheduled to work." The courtroom spun around me. Wade was reading from the same database logs that Dr. Holbrook had shown me, the ones that proved Rick had been using my credentials for his illegal searches. "I wasn't working at 2:47 a.m., I stammered. "But these database logs show your employee ID accessing patient records at exactly that time." Wade approached the bench with a printout. "Your Honor, I'd like to enter Exhibit 47B, showing extensive after-hours database access by the witness." Diana was frantically shuffling through papers, but I could see the confusion in her eyes. We'd prepared for Rick's illegal database access, but somehow Wade had gotten hold of logs that made it look like I'd been the one conducting unauthorized searches. "Ms. Martinez," Wade continued, his voice now carrying a note of disappointed authority, "isn't it true that you spent months illegally accessing patient information to build a case against Dr. Chen, driven by unresolved grief about your grandmother and enabled by a supervisor who was trying to stop your increasingly erratic behavior?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. In the gallery, I could see Dr. Chen watching with barely concealed satisfaction, while Agent Martinez's face had gone pale with the realization that Rick's trap was even more sophisticated than we'd understood. That's not what happened, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to me. Wade nodded sympathetically. I have no further questions, Your Honor. As I stepped down from the witness stand on trembling legs, I caught sight of a familiar face in the back of the courtroom. Diana Foster sat in the last row, holding a folder and watching me with an expression of fierce determination. She mouthed two words that changed everything: new evidence. Diana Foster's folder contained copies of Michael's medical records from 3 different hospitals, time-stamped communications between Dr. Chen and her colleagues, and something that made my heart race: recordings from Michael's hospital room. I recorded everything after you saved his life, Diana whispered to Diana Reeves during the lunch recess. Dr. Chen came to the hospital twice, trying to convince the neurologist that Michael's tumor was unrelated to his original symptoms. She claimed his seizures were psychosomatic and that an unstable pharmacy technician had manipulated us into seeking unnecessary treatment. The recordings were devastating. Dar. Chen's voice, crystal clear: the Martinez woman has been targeting my practice for months, coaching patients to complain about their care. This family is obviously being manipulated by someone with serious psychological problems. But the neurologist's response destroyed her credibility. Dr. Chen, this child has a stage 2 glioblastoma that's been growing for at least 6 months. Any competent physician should have ordered imaging after the first seizure episode. Your delay in proper diagnosis nearly killed this patient. When court reconvened, Diana Reeves played the recordings for the jury. Dr. Chen's face went white as her own voice filled the courtroom, caught in lies about Michael's condition and revealing her knowledge of details she shouldn't have known, including my psychological problems that Rick had fabricated. Harrison Wade objected frantically, but Judge Harrison allowed the evidence. The recordings proved Dr. Chen had been coordinating her defense strategy from the beginning, using privileged medical information to discredit witnesses. Then Diana Foster took the stand. Dr. Chen told me my son's seizures were anxiety attacks caused by an overprotective mother, she testified, her voice steady but fierce. She refused neurological testing for 3 weeks while my 8-year-old deteriorated. When Sarah Martinez insisted I seek emergency care, Dr. Chen called my insurance company that same night, trying to block authorization for the CT scan that found Michael's brain tumor. Wade's cross-examination fell apart when Diana produced her insurance company's call logs, showing Dr. Chen had contacted them at 11:47 p.m., nearly 6 hours after I'd called 911. She tried to retroactively block Michael's treatment, proving her priorities were financial rather than medical. The final blow came when Agent Martinez returned to the stand with recovered data from Rick's destroyed laptop. DEA technicians had reconstructed his communication logs, revealing text messages with Dr. Chen dating back 18 months, Martinez getting suspicious about underprescribing patterns. May need to accelerate timeline for psych evaluation strategy. They planned to discredit me from the beginning, I realized, watching Dr. Chen's composure finally crack. The jury deliberated for 47 minutes. Guilty on all counts: conspiracy to distribute controlled substances, insurance fraud, medical negligence, and witness intimidation. Dr. Chen's medical license was permanently revoked, and she received 8 years in federal prison. Rick got 12 years for orchestrating the entire operation. Webb, who testified against both of them, received 5 years in minimum security, but lost his medical license and was barred from ever working in healthcare again. 3 months later, I received a commendation from the state pharmacy board and job offers from hospitals across the country. I chose Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, where I now work in their medication safety department, building systems to catch prescription irregularities before they harm patients. Mrs. Patterson's diabetes is properly managed now. Mrs. Vasquez found a new rheumatologist who treats her pain with dignity. Michael Foster is cancer-free and starts 4th grade next month. And every morning when I review medication orders, I think about my grandmother Rosa and smile. The system didn't save her, but maybe, just maybe, we can save the patients who come after. Justice delayed isn't always justice denied. Sometimes it's just justice getting its ducks in a row.